Could the New Orleans Saints sign Cam Jordan to an extension before training camp? It sounds like that's a real possibility, and I'll talk about why that's a good move for the Saints right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast, brought to you by Scott Ficknair Injury Lawyers. Have you been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore? Scott Ficknair handles it all. You can give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. He'll always fight for the win. So I mentioned it in the beginning. Cam Jordan extension seems like it would be kind of a random thing for the Saints to do, given that he's still under contract and he's not exactly a pressing need in the eyes of many at the moment, but I actually think this would be a smart move for both parties, and I think this is the type of signing, if it were to happen, I think it's one that you should celebrate. And the reason I say that is in sports, I think we get so, bogged down to the idea of championship or bust, Lombardi trophy or bust, whatever. And I think that we've kind of become desensitized to things that we should pay attention to, which is a guy like Cam Jordan, former first-round pick out of 2011, who ends up playing with the franchise for over a decade and ends up being one of the greats to ever suit up for the franchise. And I've said many times, I would love to see Cam Jordan get a Super Bowl trophy. And obviously, I'd love to see that with the Saints. No brainer there. But at the same time, it would be a little upsetting to see him in another uniform. I wouldn't blame it on him ever. It's a business. You got to do what you got to do. And it could be the team's doing. But there would be something to be said about him staying with the Saints until the day that he retires from the NFL. And I think that a lot of us Saints fans, even during the days where the defense was terrible, and that's no longer the case, obviously, with Dennis Allen running the show, Cam was the guy who was consistent. Cam was the guy who gave you some optimism, and you always thought, hey, can you build a defense around Cam? Can you get Cam some help? It was never, man, this defense has no one. It always had Cam. Even on the darkest of days, it had Cam Jordan. And in those moments, right, the 2014s, the 2015s, the 2016s, guys like him never lost confidence. Guys like him never slacked when it came to being a leader. And that's why it felt so rewarding when you had those 2017, 2018, 2019 type of seasons. So I think for Cam Jordan, there should not be a Saints fan out here who doesn't want an extension to get done. He has been the heart and soul of defense for over a decade. He's been a phenomenal player for them. He's second in franchise history in sacks, only behind, I believe, Ricky Jackson by 8 or maybe 7.5. I'll have to check the numbers here. I'll pull it up. It's 8.5 looking at it now. So 115.5 career sacks, 123 is the number to get. And if we look at his history in the past couple seasons, there's a very good chance he gets it done this year. So let's get into what his agent said about an extension. Then we'll talk about why I think it's a smart deal and also what we could see from Cam Jordan. Well, again, I want him to be a Saint for life. I think he's earned that right. I think us fans would like to celebrate that. So let's talk about what his agent said. Jordan's agent spoke to the Associated Press about it. He said conversations about an extension are being had. So that's the first thing to look at. He said they're reportedly looking for about a 2-year deal, and they'd like it done before training camp. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. You don't really want to go into training camp with some uncertainty. God forbid there's an injury, whatever. Don't need that. So if the Saints were to get something done, sounds like that might be the deadline for them. And the last part, and I think this is the most interesting part, and this is also Cam Jordan's admission here, could be his final contract, assuming he signs an extension, right? Let's say it's 2 more years tacked on. It's not getting any younger. I don't think Cam Jordan wants to play till he's 40 years old, obviously. And at that position, you can't play till you're 40 years old. 2 more years added to his pre-existing contract, there's a very good chance that would be it for Cam Jordan. So that's why I say Saint for life there. So those are the facts about that. Let's talk about the other facts, the stats. Like we said, people lie sometimes. Stats do not lie, especially when it comes to a guy like Cam Jordan. Over his career, over 600 plus tackles, as I mentioned before, 115.5 sacks, needs to get to 123 to tie Ricky Jackson for the franchise record. I think he'll get there, no problem. So he would just need 7.5 this year to end up tying it. Let's look at the numbers of Cam Jordan, because I feel like there are some people who are worried about, is he still a productive player or can he still be elite? I still think he's a damn good starter. And I think if we look at last year's numbers, 8.5 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. The tackles for loss was pretty much on par with his normal stuff. Like if you go look back at some of his best seasons, Cam had 15 tackles for loss. So 13 tackles for loss in a year where he did miss a game due to injury finally. I think that for him, still a good number. 8.5 sacks, respectable number. And if we go the year prior, 2021, he had 12.5 sacks and 22 quarterback hits. And that year, I thought he started off so slow. He just turned it on in December. And then that kind of carried over to an 8.5 sack season, which I thought was a pretty good year for Cam Jordan. nonetheless. But here's why I have a positive outlook on this whole Cam Jordan situation. I think Cam Jordan didn't get enough help last year. And I know that it all works hand in hand, but the defensive tackles weren't great last year, and the guys across from that defensive end were not great last year, especially from a productivity standpoint, because Cam was still their leading sack getter in terms of 8.5 number, being the top number for the Saints. He was their guy. He was still their elite sack artist. But how about Peyton Turner, former first-round pick from the 2021 draft? He had 2 sacks. That's not getting it done. How about Marcus Davenport, who's no longer with the Saints? And people are going to think I'm bashing him. I'm not. I'm just saying what the facts are. He had half a sack in the London game against Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. That's the last time we heard Marcus Davenport do anything. I lied. We heard him in the final game of the season. That's because he got ejected, fitting into his Saints career. So didn't get a lot of help from the defensive ends across from him. The number 2 and number 3 guys in sack leaders for New Orleans, linebackers. Caden Ellis, no longer there, going to Atlanta. Demario Davis still there. You still expect Demario to do his thing when he's blitzing. But I think that Cam Jordan will benefit from a guy like Isaiah Foskey in the fold. I think will benefit from a Brian Brzee, benefit from a Colin Saunders, benefit from a Nathan Shepard. And I think for Cam, when you have a defensive line that's interchangeable and you have the guys from the interior also making plays, that's what makes his life a little bit easier. And I said this before, people have to find the fine line between, I'm not disrespecting the Saints defensive tackles, but I thought they could have got better. And when they lost Onyemata, they lost Shai Tuttle, you obviously don't want to lose that depth, especially guys that have been in the same system forever, but they needed to revamp the interior of the D-line. And I think if Saunders gets it going, Nathan Shepard gets it going, if Brian Brzee looks like a first-round pick, you're going to have that interior set. That's less pressure off of Cam Jordan. And how about the other side of things? Isaiah Foskey coming into the fold, this kid is hungry. He's ready to make plays. And that's a great thing because either he's going to do it or he's going to push Peyton Turner to be who the Saints drafted him in 2021. And either way, that would give Cam Jordan a guy across from him that should help out things. So I don't think signing Cam Jordan to a 2-year extension, if that's what the Saints did, I don't think this would just be some type of charity contract that they give out. Just a handout, thank you for your service, here's 2 more years. No, I think the Saints can still get a productive player out of Cam Jordan, not just for next season, but the seasons following that. I really do feel that way about Cam Jordan. I don't think that it would just be a handout. Like I said, his contract's coming up here. 2024 and 2025, you add 2 years to that deal. I think he could be a playmaker still for this team because you know he's great against the run, and he's still getting you 8+ sacks a season, and that was with minimal help. So getting better help at the defensive end, pair that with better defensive tackle play, especially in terms of getting after the quarterback and breaking the interior of the pocket, I think that will help him. So I'm excited to see this for Cam Jordan, but overall, like the sentiment stays the same. I want Cam Jordan to stay on the Saints for life. I think he's earned that right if that's what he wants. And if he wants to go to a different team after this year and says, man, I did all that I could, it's just not going to happen here, all power to him. I'll respect the hell out of the decision because I like to see him win a ring. But I think for us fans, like, we live in an era where we're watching all these shows and we're seeing all these hot takes. And it's always like, if this guy doesn't win, who gives a shit? And the way I look at it with Cam Jordan is he's one of the best defensive ends of his generation. I don't think him having a Super Bowl ring or not will change the fact that I still think he will belong in the Hall of Fame. I still think he'll have over 125+ sacks when his career is all said and done, which is a hell of an achievement. And I do think that there is something to be said about a guy who stays with the same team all of his career and is able to produce all of it. And while I mentioned the sacks, by the way, if Cam gets to like 126 or 127, I think he's top 25 all time in sacks. So for anyone who maybe turned, or raised their eyebrow or turned their head when I said I think he's a Hall of Famer, that's why I look at it that way. So we'll see what happens with Cam Jordan. I'd love to know what you guys think as always. So let me know in the comment section below for Boot Crew Media's YouTube page. But I feel like it's a no-brainer, right? Like Cam Jordan being a Saint for life is something we should celebrate. It's something we should want. And it's up to both sides to get it done. And we'll see if that happens. But I definitely think that there is some positive momentum trending in this direction. So fingers crossed on that front. And I'm telling you, I don't think this would be a handout thing. I think Cam Jordan is still a good player. And I think with help now, bringing in Foskey, Saunders, Shepard, bringing in Brzee, I think the Saints are going to make his time a little bit easier for him. Getting younger on that D-line, which is exactly what you want with an older defensive end in Cam Jordan. So we'll see how this all unfolds. And if an extension does get done, you know where you can find our analysis. It's right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for